Welcome to My Healing is Your Healing, a podcast for the woman who is ready to stop performing and reclaim her voice. I'm your host, Celeste, and around here, we don't do surface level. We go deep. Each week, we'll explore concepts like self-discovery, radical honesty, and the kind of healing that rewrites your story from the inside out. This is a space for truth-telling, for remembering who you are, and for coming home to yourself, louder, braver, and more radiant than ever. So come as you are, and let's do this together. Let's begin. Welcome back to My Healing is Your Healing, and I am your host, Celeste. And today we're going to be talking about the myth of the good woman. There is a story that many of us were handed long before we could even name it. And that is the story or this myth of being a good woman. She is selfless, spiritual, endlessly giving. She keeps the peace, she tends the wounds, and she rises above it all. She's light, but never too bright. She's wise, but never confrontational. And she is strong, but she always has a soft side. And heaven forbid she ever show her rough edges. For generations, we were told that this story is holy, that being good meant being liked, being quiet, being accommodating. But that story, that script, somewhere along the way, it becomes a cage. Because the cost of being a good woman is often being your authentic self. And so today, we are breaking that story open. I am joined by Tracy Montgomery, a spiritual mentor and coach who helps women bridge the gap between awakening and embodiment, between knowing and living their truth. Tracy's work dismantles the old paradigms that have kept women small. The ones that say healing must look perfect, that spirituality must mean self-denial, and that our humanity must be transcended to access our divinity. But what if our holiness isn't about rising above our humanity? What if it's about rooting deeper into it, letting every part of ourselves belong? Because there are so many parts of ourselves that we have been taught to hide. The angry one, the jealous one, the insecure one, the loud one, and the one who wants more. And we bury them thinking that they make us unlovable, when in reality, they're the most honest parts of who we are. We've been conditioned to equate control with strength and perfection with worth. But hiding ourselves is not strength, it is self-abandonment. And authenticity isn't a rebellion. It is just remembering who we are at our core. So this conversation, we're going to dive into what it means to stop performing, not just spirituality, but in life. We'll talk about the myths that keep women trapped in servitude, the wounds that come from perfectionism and people-pleasing, and the radical freedom that comes when you allow your light and your shadow to coexist. And you finally stop trying to be good and you start becoming whole. Because the world doesn't need more perfect women. It just needs real ones. The women who remember that authenticity is its own kind of holiness. So let's dig in. All right. Welcome, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise. All right. Well, I want to jump right in because I'm really excited about talking about the myth of the good woman with you. Because I feel like we have these conditioned cycles of servitude and perfection. And I'm really curious to hear what you actually think the world means when they say a good woman. And then what happens when a woman decides she doesn't want to play that role anymore?
Oh, that's a great question, especially to start with. And I feel like, everyone's going to have their different definition of what, quote unquote good is. But at the same time, I feel like we've all been conditioned. And when I say all, I mean like the world at large. So it's obviously a generalization. But there's a lot of ideas out there that, we need to be a quote unquote good woman, or we might insert instead, good wife or good mother or whatever that role might be. Right. And I feel like all of those archetypes have really been conditioned in a lot of ways to feed into sacrifice and servitude and suffering. And this idea that we are always giving to everyone else, nurturing everyone else, taking care of everyone else, juggling all of the balls, all of the roles, all of the time to make sure that everybody else is okay, to make sure that they are good, right? And that is kind of this programming that we've been brought up with. Me, my mom, her mom before her, through all of the generational lines, that there is this through line, if you will, of service, right? That our purpose, or, from a collective perspective, is to be in service to everyone else, which is such a disempowering place to be, right? Because we're
Yes.
totally bypassing our own soul purpose, our own soul mission, and why we're actually here, and the impact that we can create in the world as women. And what I always find so fascinating, this is a lot of the work that I do with the women in my world. And inevitably, when we do this kind of work, at some point, it's almost like the shoe drops, so to speak, right? Because when we have lived in, 5 years, 10 years, decades of our life in a place where we are always serving somebody else, and all of a sudden we no longer decide to do it anymore. All of a sudden we say no when we mean yes. All of a sudden we make a different choice, or we speak up or use our voice. It kind of like, you know, it surprises other people. Right. And I get why it would surprise other people. And it's going to take them a while to kind of get used to who we are now versus who we were then. But at the same time, I feel like there's this unspoken uh, fear, I guess, if you will, that if I step out of the box, if I'm not in service to everybody else, then what's going to happen is other people won't be happy with me. I won't be loved. I won't belong. I won't be accepted. It's going to rock the boat. My relationships, may not stay together, may not work out. And it elicits actually a lot of is that the word? Illusionary. There's the word. Illusionary fear in us as women.
Absolutely. That is okay. Thanks for introing that, because that's everything I've been dealing with over the past 36 years, right? And I've finally come to terms with the fact that I am not in control of anybody else's feelings.
Mhm. Yes.
The only person I'm in control of is mine.
Mhm.
And like I feel like that's what my dad was always trying to tell me when I was younger. And he's like, you can only control what you can touch, like what you can physically do, right? But it never made sense to me that I couldn't control how other people feel. And that's basically what we're doing when we're trying to be the good girl or the nice girl,
Yes.
right? We're trying to wear this mask of like, I'm a chameleon, and I'm trying to like fit myself into whatever role is going to benefit you so that you like me and I can stay in your tribe.
Yes, absolutely. You know what? Earlier on in my marriage, my husband would often say to me, like, well, you made me, and then it fill in the blank, right? He'd be like, well, you made me angry, or he made me upset, or like whatever that is. And I was always like, dude, you are in control of your own emotions. Nobody makes you mad or makes you angry. And it took a long time for us to start to work through that, especially once we had kids, because there was no way I was going to allow my kids to learn that other people make them feel a certain way, right? I always wanted them to understand that they would have choice, and that they have full, for lack of a better word, maybe not control over the emotions, because we can't always choose when we feel angry or whatever, right? But it's their primary responsibility. And I feel like with women, when we start to play all these different roles and we start to juggle all these different balls, that are our responsibilities, we're taking care of the house, we're taking care of the kids, we're taking care of, our parents or our grandparents or whatever that is. We also, most of us have jobs in some capacity, right? We have relationships with our partner, our friends, all of these things. What I've noticed, especially energetically and spiritually, and sometimes even mentally, is that it creates a lot of fracture and split in our identity, in our energy field, as well as at the soul level. Because at a soul level, we are already whole and holy. Like that's my entire movement, is the whole and holy woman, right? Because we've been conditioned for so long that we need to fix ourselves, right? That we can only be worthy or good enough when we're the good girl, right? Or when we are serving other people. And so it creates a lot of, really suture lines, like these fracture lines that happen in our field, when we start to subscribe to all these roles and responsibilities, and in our physical body and even in our brain, we start to feel like we're just holding up all the things, juggling all the things until we drop one ball. And then we're like so freaking hard on ourselves because we weren't able to juggle all the things all of the time.
Because society tells you and you look around you and you see everyone else doing it. So, like, why shouldn't I?
Totally.
Yeah, that was my life for so long. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so what does it cost us to be good? And then what happens when that woman decides she doesn't want to play that role anymore?
Well, I think the cost is deep, and the cost is big, and the cost is deep. And it comes through on so many levels and layers, because what it really costs us, first and foremost, is it costs us our relationship with ourselves. It costs us our physical health. It costs us our mental health, our mental capacity, right? It also costs us our energy and our emotion. And it also costs us who we are on a soul level, on a spiritual level. Because when we are running around like a chicken with our head cut off, having no time for ourselves, whether that's taking care of our physical body, whether that's, meditating if that's your jam, or whether it's, moving through hard emotions, having hard conversations, and we don't have the capacity for any of that, then we don't have any capacity for ourselves. And we've got it asked backwards. We have to start with self first, which sometimes means that we do require boundaries, right? And so when we finally can recognize that the biggest cost to being always in service to other people and always juggling all those responsibilities is actually ourselves, there's a lot that we have to move through, because there's a self-abandonment piece there that ripples through, that is so detrimental to who we are and to the identities that we play.
So true. It's almost scary to me to realize that there are not, and I don't want to use the term woke because I feel like a millennial if I say
Yeah.
but there are not very many people out there who have come to terms with this. The fact that, you have to love yourself and put yourself first. They think that it's selfish.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, up until a few years ago, I would be on the floor in tears thinking, like, why does nobody love me? Why will nobody pick me? Because I was shape shifting. I was like grabbing onto this person and being like, love me. Instead of looking in the mirror and being like, you know what, Celeste, I love you.
Yeah, that's huge. And
Yeah.
so funny that you said the words pick me, because I literally just posted an Instagram story like less than an hour ago, talking about something that's been coming up with my clients over the last couple of weeks. It's been huge. And they all keep using the same word. And they keep saying to me some version of, I wasn't quote unquote chosen, right? I wasn't chosen. This friendship circle didn't choose me, or this relationship didn't choose me, or this job or this promotion didn't choose me, right? And what that's really reflecting, in my opinion, most oftentimes, is when we are looking out into our outside world and we're being like, oh, I wasn't chosen there, and I wasn't chosen there, and I wasn't chosen there. Yes, there's for sure some levels of unworthiness that come up. But what is also attached to that is that you're not choosing you. You actually have to choose you first. And as soon as we flip that script and we're waiting for everybody else to choose us instead, then what we're doing is we're completely disempowering ourselves, first of all. And we're putting all of our worthiness dependent on other people and what they are deciding, what they are doing or what they aren't doing. And then there's these energies of like validation and earning and proving that start to creep in. And it just feels like we are in a pressure cooker that we can't get out of.
Yeah. I've been having these realizations over the past couple of weeks about this situationship that I was in for the past year and a half. And in my mind, I was calling it a relationship because that's what I always had envisioned what a relationship was, right?
Mm.
But when I'm like now standing back or like the 20,000-foot view of it, and I'm looking at it and I was like, wow, no wonder they didn't want anything to do with me. No wonder they didn't want to be my boyfriend, because I was never standing on my own 2 feet, picking the things that I wanted for myself, having an opinion and being this strong person by herself. I was always like morphing myself and saying, hey, pick me, choose me. Why aren't you there for me? And it is just this insane thing that nobody really recognizes that they're doing until they have that aha moment or until they almost get smacked in the face with it.
Absolutely. And I think that it is definitely something, and I've seen this a lot, like it's an ancestral pattern for women in so many ways, right? Like we've been parented a certain way because our mothers were parented that way, and their grandmothers were parented that way, and great grandmothers, and so on and so on and so on. And if you look far enough back, what you see in almost everybody's lineage is that women have been in a role of service. They've been a servant, right? We even see it in places like the Catholic Church, for example, right? All of the priests are usually male. The nuns who service the priests, right, are always female, right? It's actually been something that has been huge in so many cultures in so many different ways.
It blows my mind. Okay, so how do you start like recognizing or separating that true service from self-abandonment?
I think that the first piece is that you have to start choosing you first, even if it's in the most subtle ways, right? So, depending on where a person is at, that might look like, for example, when I get up in the morning, I'm going to, put my physical body first, right? So maybe I'm going to move my body. Maybe I'm going to go outside for a walk. Maybe I'm going to do some stretching, whatever that is. And you could also choose something else, right? You could choose your spiritual layer if you want to as well, right? But we start off the day by choosing ourselves first in some way. Because what I know to be true, and I did this for so long as a mom too, and I know so many other moms that do this, is they get up and the first thing they do is they start taking care of everybody else, right? They get the kids up, they make the kids lunches, they feed them breakfast, they get their homework together, they put their clothes out, they, make sure they brush their teeth, all of these things, right? And so we have to start to teach ourselves more of a devotional practice to self where we actually come first. And it does take a while to rewrite because you'll get up in the morning and you'll be like, oh my God, there's all of these things to do, right? All of these check things I got to get done before 8 a.m. And then I got to take them to school. And we always have the list and all of the things. And so we have to be willing to reprioritize what we're choosing and when we're choosing it.
I love that. So then how do you start your day? Like what is the first thing that you do?
It does change, but right now I usually get up and I start by reading. I'm really into reading right now, and I'm the kind of person that I have like 15 books. I'm surprised I can remember what's happening in each of them. But so I usually start with a cup of coffee and reading, but I always make sure that I have like a quiet half an hour. So I am getting up early enough that I know nobody else is going to bother me for 30 minutes, right? And that's before I don't check my phone, I don't check my emails, I don't do any of that as an entrepreneur, right? I don't touch any of those things until I'm ready. So it's me first, then it's my family first, and then it's my business.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, I've been thinking about this in the way of who do you want to be in 5 years, right? And that person is never going to show up. You're not going to live 5 years and then all of a sudden you're going to have the mansion on, the waterfront property and, be this amazing woman. You have to start today and you have to start the little habits and then they become a habit and then you start the new habits. And it's just this perpetual motion of becoming.
Absolutely. Like that's what identity reclamation or upgrading our identity really looks like, right? Is we can sit there and say, okay, what's this version of me that is, 6 months from now or 12 months from now or 5 years from now or whatever? Who is she? What does she look like? What does she do? What's a typical day for her? What are the things that she's choosing? What are the things that she's no longer tolerating? And then we kind of have to do a backwards design where as we move through every single day, we have to start speaking the way that she would speak, choosing the way that she would choose, acting the way that she would act, saying no the way that she would say no, right? And we have to start installing a new belief system, a new aligned action system, and a new way of being in order to make that leap into a new identity, which is usually the hardest part, right? We can always think about or mentalize or visualize who that person is going to be. But then when it comes to doing something like saying no, or not eating the sugar, if that's the thing for you, right? Or taking the daily walk, or, no longer tolerating relationships that make you feel like crap, whatever that is, that's where most of, society, not just women, but that's where most people kind of fall short and fall off the wagon is because they're not willing to move through different actions, not necessarily because they're hard, but because they feel uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, I love I was talking to someone else on the podcast, and they were talking about this being your comfort zone, and thinking about it in a different way, because like the unknown is your uncomfortable zone, right? But almost having to change that mindset, because it should be a place that you want to go, that discomfort. So like rephrasing it or thinking about it in a different way to allow yourself to get to the place that you want to be.
And the thing about being uncomfortable, like, I mean, yes, it's uncomfortable. Most of the time, is it like life threatening? No, but it's uncomfortable in some way. But if there's no level of discomfort, then there's also no level, or there's no level of growth. There's no level of transformation. There's no level of expansion. There's no level of evolution in that. So
I really like that.
there's a reframing or a rewiring that can happen, right? Where we can start to allow ourselves to actually embrace what is uncomfortable, because it means that there is change that is happening. It means that we are growing. It means that we are transforming. And so we can take it as a really good sign that we're on our path and we're in the right direction.
Mhm. I like that. So, how did you get so wise? Like, what is the story behind you having to learn this? Because obviously, you don't get here just by living in your comfort zone.
No, it's been a journey. Like, I'll be the first one to tell you, it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a week. It didn't even happen in a year. And I don't say that to like discourage anybody or to scare you or anything like that. But I think that what's important is that we recognize that it is an evolution and it is a journey, because we're taught in so many ways, like instant gratification, right? Like look at
Mm.
Amazon Prime and, our devices and all of those things, right? And so it's like, what do you mean? I can't take that new identity and get delivered on Prime? Like, no, we can't, right? So we got to recognize that, right? There's going to be moments that feel really good. There's going to feel moments that feel not so good. And it's all part of the journey. That's what the human experience is about. And whether you're spiritual or not, one thing I can promise you is that you said yes to that for that exact reason, right? So when you're experiencing that, it's exactly the place to be. And so if I rewind, I was totally like good girl, right? Like I had a little rebellious streak, but eventually I always did like what my parents wanted me to do, what I was supposed to do. I went to school, became an elementary teacher. I got married, had 2.0, kids and the white picket fence and the dog and all of these things. And when my youngest was barely 2 years old, I started my spiritual journey in a very like basic way by deciding to take yoga teacher training. And I'm the kind of person that like takes things like I'd never done a yoga class, but I was like, I'm gonna do yoga teacher training. Like that's kind of how I roll. But part of it was I needed to get out of the house, number one, because I was just full-time momming. And the second part of it was that I felt like I had lost myself when I became a mom. And I don't blame my kids. That was just my own internal experience, right? All of a sudden, that good girl and that caretaker role was like on full overdrive, right? With two toddlers that were really close together. And I felt like there was no more space for myself. I felt like I was disconnected with myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know what I wanted. Like it was like, I don't think I have a hobby. I don't even know what kind of music I like anymore. Like what foods do I like? Like it was just like I was this different person from another planet or another world that I didn't even know. So that started my journey, and I started to dabble in some of the really, common things like yoga, meditation. I got my Reiki certification and I started to play that way. And as I was a teacher, I ended up getting this 3-year contract, and it was to do a pilot project where I was taken out of the regular classroom and I became a mindfulness teacher and coach. And this was before like mindfulness was ever on the cover of Times or like it was a thing. So it was a bit of an uphill battle with some people,
Okay.
but I was writing the curriculum for it because that didn't exist, like all of the things. And it was a great job. And I really got to be with the kids. I got to teach something that I loved, and it was a beautiful, beautiful fit. But when the project was over and it wasn't renewed because they wanted to spend the money on technology, shocking, I know. We just got some more Chromebooks, you know. But so then I went back into the regular classroom, and that created an experience for me of huge contrast, because even though it's very innate to me to teach, it's very natural and easy for me. I was not passionate about the current elementary curriculum.
Yeah.
Not shocking. Loved being with the kids, but didn't love all of the other stuff that came with it. And so there was like this slow erosion and what felt like a bit of like a really slow soul death, if you will, right? It was really, really
Mhm.
hard for me. I know this isn't how everybody feels, but it was really hard for me to go and have to put my time and my energy into something every day that I wasn't passionate about, that I didn't love. And I really wrestled internally with this idea that I was going to work every day to raise everybody else's kids while somebody else was raising mine. And I just like couldn't compute that. Like it made no sense to me.
Mhm.
And so I was in this job for a few years and highly unhappy and was not necessarily like, obviously, I wasn't billboarding it or anything, but I also wasn't quiet about it. Um, and it kind of came to a head because I got surplus. There was a new school that was built. I got surplus. There was too many kids or teachers, sorry, at my school. So I was given a couple options for a new position and I like hated everyone. Like they gave me exactly what I didn't want, which was so fascinating. And full transparency, when that happened, I was like in full victim of it. I was like, how could they do this to me? I've been here for over 10 years. Like everything was being done to me. I couldn't find any responsibility in it for myself. I couldn't see it as a gift. Like it wasn't until a couple years later, like you talk about that 20-foot view, that I was like, oh, that's what happened. How many times had I asked the universe for this gift? And finally it was like, I kind of chalk it up to the universe was like, well, if you're not going to do anything about it, let me just help you here, push, it was like that. So I left and I'd already done my massage therapist. So I walked right into building a massage therapy practice. And once I started doing that, then I started to really dabble into a lot of the more esoteric and spiritual modalities and things like that, like Akashic records and energetics and frequency work and chords and contracts and all of that kind of stuff. And through that process, what I ended up realizing, and it was only about a year and a half ago, COVID was actually a brilliant thing for me, if I rewind a little bit more, because it forced me to stop plugging into everybody else's ideas and just start plugging into myself. So I started to really recognize that even though I was in like a spiritual self-help place, there were still so many ideas, so many beliefs, and so many systems that were completely disempowering, that were asking people to essentially give their power away to a specific belief system, a specific process, a specific idea. And once I started to realize that, I really started to find my voice and find more of my own power and my own truth. And I stopped subscribing to a lot of those things. Then, a year and a half ago, I went to a spiritual retreat, we'll call it, and had a not great experience because I had spoken up um, about pedestaling facilitators and that I wasn't interested in pedestaling anybody or, bowing down. That kind of idea wasn't for me. And I left, it was actually quite traumatic. So I left feeling very traumatized. I was called out in public in front of over 30 people. I was ostracized. I was told that I had more healing to do. It's like a whole other story. But essentially, that was the final catalyst for me to unplug from that idea of like servitude and sacrifice and good girl. Because once I moved through that, and I had a lot of my own healing to do because of that experience. But once I moved to the other side of that, then I was like, just no longer here for any of that story and any of that programming, and no longer entertaining the idea that I always had to be in my healing or that there was always something to fix. Like I finally got to the place where I was like, pardon my French, fuck that. It was just like no more. I'm no longer playing in this game anymore, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. And it's so interesting to me how many people have like the same kind of story where you have to get to this place where there's like this cliff and you have to decide to jump off and fly. Because otherwise you're just gonna come crashing down to rock bottom.
Yeah.
And not pick yourself back up. And you made the choice to say, fuck it, I'm going to be me and I'm going to go do these things that are for me. Yeah.
And full transparency, like I know some people's biggest fears are, well, I'm going to lose relationships. I'm going to lose friendships. And yep, you definitely might. I did. It doesn't mean everybody will, but I did. Yes. And what I would also say is, even though it was really hard and it was really sad to lose some of those relationships, choosing myself first was still the best choice that I could have made.
I love that because I had a very similar experience too. And when I left Phoenix after walking away from the altar, none of the people that I was friends with ever said a word to me afterwards. And right is interesting. And so, like those people that are meant for you, like you said, you were like going from thing to thing to thing and trying to figure out what was meant for you. Those people that are in all of those other avenues or energies aren't your people.
Yeah.
And I almost like, I don't want to say those people are going to leave you good, but it is almost a blessing in disguise because those people are going to be the ones that you have to shapeshift for. But the people that show up in your life, when you are your full authentic self, there's no chameleons in the room.
And, every relationship that I've had where I had to shapeshift or I had to change in some way, I'm so grateful for, because they were the mirror and the catalyst that was essentially refracting back to me who I am, who I want to be, who I'm meant to be. And once you see that, you can't unsee that. Right. And when we start to take our power back in that way, what also happens is, from an energetic level, like our frequency changes. And when our frequency changes, then we no longer in an alignment for some things and some people, and we're also more in alignment for other things and other people.
I like thinking about that. So when I first moved here, there were a lot of things that I had to shed from my old life that I was like questioning, hey, does Celeste even like this? And I went through this whole list of things that I wanted to try to see if it was more me. And at that point in time, I was doing Ironmans and marathons. And I quit like a year ago. And I know for sure I don't want to do another Ironman, but I am now, after sitting on it for so long, I finally just signed up for another marathon. And I'm like, this is actually me. It is not something that I am pretending was a part of my life. It really is me. And that is one of the best feelings ever, is to actually figure out what is resonating with you and come back to that frequency.
Yeah, I love that. And, sometimes it can be so simple. Like, I don't know about you, but how many times this has shown up for me a lot. Our families like deciding we're going to order some food out, or like when the world was shut down, this was the only thing we could do. And the question be like, well, what kind of food do you feel like, or where do you want to go? And before I had fully learned this lesson, I'd always be like, I don't know, you pick. I'm good with whatever, without even just speaking to, and knowing in my head that I'm like sitting there thinking, oh, I'd really like this, but I'm not saying it because I'm willing to sacrifice myself. It was always at the expense of myself. Right. And what I've noticed happens, whether it's, like the Ironman and the marathon, or it's like what you're going to have for dinner, because it's always happening in the everyday moments. Right. But every single time that we choose ourselves first and we speak our truth, even if it's not what happens, like even if I would have said, well, I feel like Chinese, and the rest of the family is like, well, we feel like Italian, so we have Italian. The fact that I didn't get what I wanted isn't the point at all. But what is the point is that I was brave enough to speak my truth, and to do that from a place of confidence, to do that and have that experience of being able to do that. And it was safe, because when we start to do those things, those are the things that compound, and those are the things that take us to our next level and our next identity.
I absolutely love this. Okay. So a final question for you before we talk about how to work with you is, who is the woman that you're becoming now?
Wow. Who is the woman that I'm becoming now? That's a great question. Well, I think that, it's so funny, because every time I reach a new level and I'm like, yeah, like I feel like I'm speaking my truth. I feel like I'm being honest. I feel like I'm saying the things. And then it's like a new level shows up and I'm like, I didn't know I had that in me. Okay. And I do have a bit of a disruptor energy sometimes. Like I do call out the spiritual self-help myths and things that I personally don't believe in, not because everybody has to believe what I believe, but just I feel like it's something that needs to be done. There needs to be more conversation about all the ways that we've been programmed that, we always have to be in our healing, or we always have to be in a session, or we always have to be giving our power away to our teacher, whatever that is. I don't play in those games at all. So I'm always finding like this new level of truth that I didn't know existed. And so I- I've noticed that over just the last month, actually, that there's this new level of like truth that's coming out within me. And I think that the woman that I'm becoming really is just a channel and a vessel for truth. And it's not because my truth has to be your truth, but it's just to create an activation and a ripple effect for you to find yours.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay. So you talk about the whole and the holy, and I know that's part of how you work with other women. So let's maybe talk about that a little bit more. And then how do you work with people
Yeah.
and
So
how can they work with you?
the movement is the full and holy way, or the full and holy woman. They both go together. I have a 5-pillar pathway that I work through with women. And it really is about allowing us to be all of who we are. It doesn't just mean the quote unquote good parts, right? Like we do shadow integration work, and we spend a lot of time excavating different beliefs and projections and identities to see to the truth of who we are. Everything is always coming back to the truth. And the more that we can access our own truth, the more that we are fully expressed, the more that we can be fully seen, the more that we can meet our emotional needs, the more that we can have relationships in our lives, plutonic or romantic, whatever that is, that are truly not only in a space of reciprocity, but that are nurturing and fueling each other and that feels safe. And the whole and holy way is really about finding your way back home to yourself, as kind of, cheesy or cliche as that might sound. And when I say home, it's all of the parts of you, because we've learned to compartmentalize. We've learned to create those fractures. We've learned to create those splits, especially as women. And what it's time to do, in my personal opinion and in my experience, is to start to bring all of those parts back to ourselves. And when that happens, we no longer have to show up as the mom over here and the career woman over here and the daughter over here. We get to be that in all spaces and places. And is that sometimes going to rub people the wrong way? Yes. And that's actually not our problem. That's their problem. Right. So that really is the work. Is it stopping subscribing to things like I always have to be in my healing, or something I used to hear all the time. It would be like, well, after I just heal this one thing, then I'll be whole, or then I'll be, fully loved, or then I'll be fully accepted. And I would challenge that. And I would say the opposite. I would say, no, you are full and holy now because you're here. And the sooner that we can recognize that, the more in our power, the more sovereign every single one of us will become.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
So how can people work with you? I will put it in the notes below, but how can people work with
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. So, I mean, first I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Tracy Montgomery. So I'd love to connect with anybody that way. I also have my website, riseoftracy.com. And on there, I've got my monthly portal or membership space where we go through the whole and holy woman, the whole and holy way. We move through the 5-pillar path. There's 7 ascension codes that we live by, which are channel keys that bridge the gap between who we are as divine and who we are as human. And we do shadow integration there. We do energy clearing. We do subconscious programming. It really is a space unlike anything else on the internet, because you get everything all in one spot.
I love that. So the last thing is,
Mhm.
if anybody is going to take away just one thing from today's conversation, what do you want that to be?
If you were going to take away one thing, I think based on everything what we've said, is I would say lean in. Like anytime you feel that element of uncomfortableness, discomfort, a little bit of anxiousness, a little bit of nervousness, whatever that is, lean all the way in, because the more that you lean in, the more that you will normalize a level of discomfort. I am absolutely going to put that into practice. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, I love that. I do too. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation. Ah, thank you so much for having me. It was beautiful. Absolutely. If this conversation resonated with you, if something was stirred inside of you, maybe remembering who you are, or maybe a truth that you've been avoiding, take that as your invitation to begin. You can connect with Tracy Montgomery and explore her work at risewithtracy.com or on Instagram at tracy.montgomery_. All of this will go in the notes below. And if you want to keep diving deeper into some conversations like this, join the Radiant Women's Collective at myhealingsyourhealing.com. This is going to be an every other week women's circle where we dive into conversations just like these and explore concepts like being a good girl or what is identity. This kicks off in January, so be sure to get your spot. And if there's a topic that you would love me to explore on the show or something that you are personally moving through and want reflected here, send me a message. I would love to create an episode just for you. Thank you as always for being here and for showing up and being yourself and doing this work with us. Until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and remember, you were never meant to dim your light. Thanks for tuning in and being here, for healing out loud, and for walking this path beside me. If this episode cracked something open or helped you remember a part of yourself, pass it on and share it with someone you love. For more support, free resources, or the next steps to your journey, head over to my website, myhealingisyourhealing.com. And if you loved today's conversation, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your words help this space grow and help more women find their way home to themselves. If I was your muse today, then my healing is your healing. Until next time.